Morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our participants from different parts of the world. Welcome to the webinar on top tips for getting published in Bioethics Series 2.0. I hope that you are all excited to learn from our esteemed panelists today. This webinar is presented by the Southeast Asia Bioethics Network in partnership with the Asian Bioethics Review and funded by Welcome. I am your moderator, Leander Marquez from the University of the Philippines. Today's webinar will share key lessons to successful publishing in bioethics, what makes a good bioethics article, how to develop your research ideas into strong analysis and discussion, how to navigate the complex landscape of journal publishing, and how to avoid common mistakes when submitting to journals. Before we begin, let me remind everyone of 3 simple rules for our webinar. First, please keep your microphones on mute to prevent any disruptions. Second, write any questions or comments that you might have in the chat box. We will do our best to address them. Third, questions will be answered at the end of all the presentations. Questions after each presentation will only be for the purpose of clarification. Click the raise hand button if you have any clarificatory questions and wait for the presenter to recognize you. Now, let me introduce the members of our panel in today's webinar. Professor Graham Laurie is Editor-in-Chief of the Asian Bioethics Review and a Professorial Fellow at the School of Law, University of Edinburgh, Scotland. He has held multiple ethics and policy advisory roles, including membership of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics and the British Medical Association Medical Ethics Committee. We also have Dr. Carl Kals, who is currently Assistant Editor of the Asian Bioethics Review. As part of his interests in systems, he researches the digitalization of health, working on topics such as the ethics of artificial intelligence in healthcare and digital health surveillance. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Piali Mitra, who is working as Deputy Editor of the Asian Bioethics Review. She has also been serving as Volunteer Series Editor for the Ethical Dilemmas in Philosophy series, a sub-series of the Public Philosophy Beat at the blog of the American Philosophical Association in the USA. Without further ado, let us begin our journey to getting published in bioethics. To talk about writing a research paper, tips for better writing, may I call on Professor Graham Laurie and Dr. Piali Mitra.
Thank you very much, Leander, and welcome to everybody who's joining us. We're delighted that you are. This is very important to us to help build capacity in bioethics, particularly when it comes to writing and publishing in the field. So we're delighted that you're here. Yes, as Leander said, Piali and I are going to talk about tips for better writing a research paper. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So the outline is as follows. I am going to take you through the importance of reflecting on your contribution to the field and also the importance of honing your research voice. And I'll explain what I mean by that in due course. And I'll also take you through some common mistakes that we see when people submit to our journal, and these will be true across the board. And also, I'm going to talk about research integrity in due course. Piali will focus very much on the attitude that you should adopt when you are coming to your writing, having a clear aim for your work, thinking about having an engaging start for that work and a thoughtful conclusion that brings it all together in a systematic fashion. She will also encourage you to be your own impassionate judge and she will talk about some of the current debates and ideas emerging about responsible uses of artificial intelligence in research and writing. This is a very live topic for everybody involved in publishing at the moment, and we're still struggling to find some answers. Next slide, please. So, your contribution. When we publish, we want to say something of value, something that's new, something that will have some impact, at least in academia, and sometimes in the real world as well. And we do that through our articles, our books. And with respect to articles, it's really important that you define and describe your contribution to the field very, very clearly. And the best way to start to do that is to focus on the importance of the abstract in an article. Many people consider the abstract to be an afterthought. It's something that they write once they've written the article. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. The abstract should really be the Netflix trailer to your academic movie. It needs to do a lot of work to pull the reader in, to make them want to read more. It needs to sum up in 200, 300 words the essence of what you're saying that's new, why it's important, why it's original, why it's significant, why somebody should continue to read. So the abstract, if you write it at the beginning of what you think you're going to do, it can then serve as a really strong and powerful guide for your writing throughout the course of that process. And then, of course, you have to revisit the abstract at the end to make sure that what you say you're going to do, you actually do in the article. But the abstract is your friend. So we have to focus on, in good contributions, we have to focus on what's original and significant, and I'll say more about that in due course in the webinar. But you also need to consider the value of a strong structure, that the structure of your piece has to be logical, it has to be coherent, the different elements of what you're saying need to fit together in an obvious way. And if it's not so obvious, or if you're going to come back to certain topics later on, it's really important to plant signposts in your work. And by what I mean by that is just indicate to the reader where this line of argument or analysis is going. If you're going to come back to a topic, tell them that you will do that. Plant the signposts in the landscape of your work. In terms of making a really valuable contribution, I think it's important to distinguish between three elements: the research problem, the research questions that arise from that problem, and the method you will use to answer the research questions. The research problem is basically a description of what is annoying you about this topic. What do you think has not been adequately answered in the field? Do you disagree with somebody else? Do you think there's a hole in the literature that's not been filled? You need to describe what the problem is that you're going to address. And that in itself is quite a challenging task, but it makes for the basis of an excellent article. Secondly, you then need to ask, what questions do I need to answer in order to address the problem? And these need to be posed as questions, and these are your research questions. What questions answer the problem that I've posed? And thirdly, you need to be able to develop and implement a method or methods that actually allow you to answer the questions so that you can address the problem. That breakdown is a fundamentally sound way to address your contribution. Another thing to think about is the importance between the balance of description and analysis. Too many people spend a lot of their paper describing the context and other people's work and not enough on analysis. You need to flip that. It needs to be much more focused on analysis and less on description. And finally, there's what I call the so what question. If you get to the end of an article and the reader says, so what? Then you haven't done your job. You need to address the so what question. Why is it important and significant what you've said? Next slide, please. Your voice. Your voice is about what you're actually contributing to the field through your work, what you're saying, what you're bringing to our field and to enhance our understanding. In order to develop your voice, here are some tips. So demonstrate early that you know the field and the stubborn problems that require new research, i.e. you know that there's still research to be done. Be very clear about the ways in which your work is original and significant. For original, you can ask yourself, what are you saying that's new in the field? What's your voice? And with respect to significant, why should anybody care about what you're saying? Why is it important? Some people get concerned about the writing style. Should I use the first person, the third person, etc.? Certainly in our journal, we're less concerned about that, and we're more concerned about you making a strong academic contribution to the field and saying something that really is original and significant. And a way to do that well is to fully develop your arguments and also to acknowledge the limitations of what you're doing. Another mistake people make is to sometimes overreach and to try and claim too much or to do too much in the work. And that often ends up weakening your voice, making it a thin voice, rather than focusing on the real essence of the problem and trying to answer that as best you can. Next slide, please. So common mistakes. These follow from what I've just been saying. First of all, a poor abstract. As an editor, if I read the abstract and I don't really know what you're going to do, you've already lost me. Secondly, if there's no strong or clear sense of the originality and the significance of the piece, what's new? Why should I care? As I said before, it's important to get the balance right between description and analysis. If there's too much description at the expense of analysis, it feels like a student paper from an undergraduate level, that we have perhaps 80% of description and then 10% of your views and 10% of a conclusion. That's not a strong academic publishable paper. Another important issue in our field is that many times authors do not pay enough attention to the bioethical framing of the discussion. And what I mean by that is, what school of thought are you engaging with in bioethics? There's many, many ways to approach bioethics. A principled approach, utilitarianism, deontology, different schools, different approaches, different ways of thinking about ethics. And it's important that you set the scene for your own work and let the reader know what that frame is within which you will be working. I think it should be obvious, but I'm going to say it, that we need to be rigorous in making our central argument. It needs to be logical, it needs to be sound, it needs to be defended. And finally, once again, always ask yourself the so what question when you get to the end of your draft. If you can't answer the so what question well, you need to go back and do some more work. Next slide, please. Piali.
So I take up from where Graham has left off, as he has said that to maximize the chances of getting published, we need first to know what journal we are selecting to get ourselves published. It should align with the research topic we are essentially doing. For example, if we are thinking of doing a bioethical work, we should generally focus upon the social ethics and the bioethics and other that relates to the bioethical research works you are doing. Or you can address the psychology, but you cannot go on publishing in the mathematical journals for your bioethics. So we have to be aware of which journal we are selecting for our research topic. Then we have to explore the various journals, analyze the topics that we are trying to cover, and see whether our research aligns with the with the targeted readerships we are thinking of in our mind. So we have to pick the right audience for the paper, as it can include an outline of the paper that has level of details which can address both the general audiences as well as the specialist one in the research topic. Actually, your paper is a research story. You are communicating to the greater audience as well as to the specialists or the experts. So you have to set your aim and the goal of the paper. So before even typing or penning your paper, ask yourself, what's the message your paper is carrying and why this message is so important that you need to publish and get the world to know what you are doing. Please move on to the next slide. So what is needed for an engaging start to a strong conclusion is that you need to have a very good introduction. Your introduction is actually your gateway to your research. It must really address three fundamental inquiries like what, why, and the how question. Now, what is meant by these what questions? This what question generally offers a precise details about the topics you are thinking of covering. It should provide a clear context as well as elucidate essential terminology or the concepts or acronyms you are thinking of using in the research. Now, why questions? This generally furnishes the responses to the inquiries like what novel informations you are bringing or what insights you are trying to address arising out of your research. Which matters does your paper trying to assist in defining or even resolving? For example, your paper is about a solution to a research problem or a case of an open question. You may not always have a solution to your research problem. You can leave some open question to your research topic. So in this section, it should cover all those portions. Now comes the how questions. So the introduction should incorporate certain guidelines outlining the forthcoming discussions. Okay, now we come to the conclusion. The conclusion is equally important as the introduction. So the conclusion should guide the reader out of the paper's arguments, leaving them with a sense of closure. It should have a close. It should not be like an abrupt, so that one who is reading it can think about it, work upon it in future. Okay, we move on to the another slide. Now, be your own judge and test the water in your own backyard. What is meant by that? You are the best referee for your own work. You are an expert on the problem you study because it is you who have worked upon it for a certain number of years or maybe some months. So you know best what you are working upon. So what you need is that revise your draft, purge yourself on the picture, and judge and scrutinize your work dispassionately, as a referee would generally have done. Never hesitate to throw away pieces of your writing and start over from the scratch. If they fail, this is not your self-task. Like if you think that certain portion is not essential, you need to remove them. If you feel that you need to work upon it on a certain topic or a certain line, you should work upon certain arguments. Please do it without even being biased, without being prejudiced. The way out is to anticipate the plausible questions and critiques that may arise of the work. Best is to invite feedback from your colleagues, from your peers, from the collaborators, and discuss the opinions, suggestions, and comment on the work. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to address the responsible use of the AI. So this is very important. So the rise of AI in academia is one of the most important thing. So AI is offering tools for grammar, structure, citation, content generation, even enhancing efficiency and improving the quality of academic writing. So we need a responsible AI uses because it is crucial for maintaining academic integrity by preventing plagiarism, ensuring originality, fostering culture of honesty and ethical behavior in academia. So responsible AI focuses on developing and implementing ethical, transparent, and accountable AI system. It ensures that as we advance AI technology, we prioritize fairness, privacy, and the overall well-being of individuals and society. But there's certain potential risk. Like AI models can reflect biases present in the data they are trained on. Proper attributions and citation is actually very necessary when using AI tools in academic writing. Transparency and accountability are much needed for the use of AI tools in research and writing. Next slide, please. So there are some real world examples where which tools that can be implemented for research writing. It's like AI tools like Site-Space Literature Review can be used upon ChatGPT, WordWise, Overtune, and Otter. So despite these many challenges using AI tools in academic writing, it can indeed propel radical changes in scientific research. So the embracing the best AI tools for research writing pushes academia into area of efficiency and precision. Next slide. So when publishing papers on AI, incorporating human-centered values signifies not replacing or diminishing human roles. Now, what is meant by this human-centric approach? It shifts the focus in AI developments from technology to people. The priority moves to human needs, well-being, and human autonomy. Human-centered AI aims to empower individuals and enhance the experience by designing the systems that are usable and beneficial to all segments of society. Now, a paper on AI-powered medical diagnosis mechanism generally focuses on the use as well as, as well as in others, it helps in the development in ethical issues that relates to patients' privacy, autonomy, even in data protections and potential for algorithm biases. Next slide. Now, there are certain publishers' policies, like Springer Nature adopts an ethically focused approach by deploying or using AI-based solutions. It should be noted that Springer Nature in no way support attributing authorship to AI till date. Springer Nature places human-centered values in the approach to the responsible use of AI. I will address other publications policy while giving the question answer during the question answer sessions. Next slide. Well, what are the key takeaway? Like user feedbacks have to be incorporated in development cycles so AI systems can evolve in response. A team-based approach is essential for the ethical AI practice in research writing. Now, this team-based approach can involve communicating with the editors when in doubt. Also, two or more author collaborates to contribute to the same paper with each author's role and contributions clearly defined. They may be set in the acknowledgement sections or in a separate section mentioning the contributions of each of the authors as well as the prompts that are being used for developing the paper. Prompts, that is the models, language models that are being used in developing the papers. So good research practice should not be overshadowed by risk, inefficiencies, and public interest. Please, next slide.
Thank you, Piali. So I'm going to take back and widen this discussion to research integrity, because in essence, the question about what is responsible use of AI in publishing is really just one question among a host of questions about research integrity. And we've added these slides on AI and research integrity since the first time we did this webinar a few months ago, in direct response to questions that were raised by people in the bioethics community. So, as I say, responsible AI is very live. It's something that we are rigorously debating across the whole of academic publishing at the moment. And we don't know what responsible AI will look like. We are still discussing and debating what the parameters of responsible AI mean. We need some guidance about what AI can do. We need to have some discussion and debate about what we think is unacceptable and what are the parameters of what is acceptable. And a way to conduct that dialogue, and you're all involved in it as well because you are members of this community, you need to contribute as much as anybody else. A way to conduct that dialogue is for us to take the step back and ask, well, if it's part of research integrity, what work has already been done about research integrity, and how can we use that work to inform our current debates about responsible AI? Yeah, so that's what we're suggesting we should do in today's webinar. So let's ask, first of all, what is research integrity? Well, we have many definitions, but the one I think is most helpful for today's purposes is the one offered by the UK's Research Integrity Office. And it suggests that research integrity is very broad. It refers to all of the factors that underpin good research practice and promote trust and confidence in the research process. So it's a very, very broad church. And more specifically, we can look to the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity from 2010, an agreement across many, many institutions and nations, which identified 4 principles that can act as action guiding principles when we reflect on questions of research integrity, including responsible AI. So the 4 principles are as follows: honesty in all aspects of research, accountability, which you've heard Piali mention already, professional courtesy and fairness in working with others. That points very much to questions and concerns about authorship, and also good stewardship of research on behalf of others, and that often speaks to the good stewardship of data or research findings. So those principles can inform how we go about trying to sort of come up with concrete suggestions about what is good research integrity and what is good and responsible use of AI. Next slide, please. So, sticking with the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity, from its 4 principles, it then goes on to identify 14 key responsibilities. Now, this document was published in 2010. It doesn't talk about AI. But nonetheless, these responsibilities cover the gamut of research integrity as it was understood 15 years ago, and also serve as very good indications of the kinds of issues that we all need to be reflecting on when we want to ask and answer questions such as, what is responsible AI? So what I've done here on this slide, I've just pulled out some examples that I think are illustrative for the topic that we're focusing on today. So when we talk about integrity, the first responsibility focuses on that, integrity, and it makes the point that researchers must take responsibility for the trustworthiness of their research. And you might be asking yourselves, well, what does that mean? Well, we can't provide you with the answer to that because it depends on your context. And what these responsibilities and principles encourage you to do and support you to do is to reflect on what that means. So if you're taking responsibility for the trustworthiness of your research, what might it mean? Well, it might mean if you're using data, if you gather data, that we can rely on the integrity of the data, that the data are actually accurate. It might mean that if you have engaged in risky research involving human subjects, then that you have gone through appropriate Research Ethics Committee approval, that consent is actually valid and applies to the research that you've done. So all of these permutations speak to integrity, but it's for you to reflect on what it means to be responsible and trustworthy in that context. Many times in publishing we have questions about authorship, and the sixth responsibility under the Singapore Statement focuses directly on authorship. And note here what it says. Researchers should take responsibility for their contributions to all publications, funding applications, reports, and other representations of the research. If you contribute to it, you should take responsibility for it and stand by what you said and put into the public domain. But note too that lists of authors should include all of those and only those who meet applicable authorship criteria. Now, each publishing house will have its own authorship criteria, and I'll refer you to the Springer Nature ones in just a second. But the point here is that the list of authors in a publication should include all of those, but only those who meet the criteria. A shorthand way to think about that I find helpful is to think about whether anybody who's claiming authorship has made a material contribution to the final product. Now, a material contribution can take many, many forms. It could be in coming up with the first original idea. It could be doing a lot of the background research work and contributing to some of the writing. It might be coming in at a later stage and helping to put a good structure on the piece and make sure that the core messages of what's original come out clearly. There's many, many ways that you can make a material contribution. But I would suggest to you that to be a genuine author and to respect research integrity, you have to make a material contribution, and only if you have can you call yourself an author. Finally, on responsibility, point 11 I think is important, which focuses on reporting irresponsible research practices. And this just directs researchers to report anything you think is inappropriate to the relevant authorities, including research misconduct, fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism. And plagiarism, obviously, copying is a big issue in publishing, but there are many grey areas around the edges of that, and we can talk more about that in the questions if you wish to do so. Next slide, please. So, Springer Nature publishes our journal, Asian Bioethics Review. They have engaged very robustly with many of these issues, and indeed if you're interested in knowing more about research integrity, there is an introduction that you can follow. It's a short course that's available on this link, and we'll make all of these materials public for you in due course. And if you're concerned about authorship in particular, I gave you, my working definition of authorship focusing on a material contribution, but the specific definition of authorship from Springer Nature can be found in this link at the bottom of the slide. And depending on whichever journal and publisher you're going for, that they will have their own version of these definitions. Next slide, please. So this brings to an end the first session in this webinar. And I just want to sum up the tips from myself and from Piali for you to take home. So going back to what I said, please do not underestimate the value of a good abstract. A good abstract helps you to define the limits of the terrain that you're going to explore in your work. It helps you to identify very succinctly and clearly what you think you're saying that's original, why it's significant, and also how you're going to go about tackling the research problem. So the abstract is your friend. Fundamentally, for all types of research, in order to get published, you have to focus on what's original and what's significant in your contribution. In other words, what's new and why should anybody care? Again, going back to my point about balance in your work, aim for short, tight description of the research problem and of the existing literature, and then spend more of your paper on a longer, fuller analysis of your particular contribution, what you're arguing, what you're saying, how you're giving expression to your voice. Yeah? So it's really important to obviously situate yourself within the existing literature, But that should not take up vast tracts of your paper. If you do that, what that signals to an editor is you don't really know and are not comfortable enough with the literature at the moment. Somebody who's really comfortable with the existing literature knows how to summarize it, knows how to pull out the relevant parts of it that point to the topic under discussion in this article, know how to keep it tight, and to use that as a basis, a jumping off point, for then to move on to their own analysis and to say something original and significant. What we're looking for ultimately, fundamentally, is that a paper is well researched. So obviously, what I've just said about literature, you need to show that you're familiar with the literature. Your approach to the topic, whatever it might be, needs to be well structured. And it needs to, the argument analysis needs to follow in a logical, clear, coherent fashion. And ultimately, you need to be concise in what you're saying. If a paper rambles and goes off in different directions, then the editor and the readers will get lost, and it significantly dilutes the power of your voice and your contribution. And if it happens too much, then it's likely to result in a rejection for publication. Being concise is really important. Picking up on what Piali said on responsible uses of AI and my contribution as well, remember this is a very live topic. We cannot today or at any other point in the near future give you definitive answers about what responsible uses of AI look like. We can probably be clear about what is not acceptable. You can't get AI to write your paper for you, but that's an easy case. Other grayer areas require debate and reflection, and that takes us into the broader realm of research integrity. Look at that Singapore statement, look at what the publishers say, and use those as tools for yourselves to reflect on what it means to work with integrity, and if you're using AI, what it means to use it responsibly. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Great. Now we have a couple of minutes for clarificatory questions. If anyone has any clarificatory questions, you may raise your hand right now. All other questions will be entertained after all the presentations. Okay, so I think there are no clarificatory questions. So let's move on to the next. Thank you, Graham and Piali. Now, once you have written your research paper, you would want to submit it to a journal. In this regard, to shed some light on choosing a suitable journal for your paper, I would like to call Dr. Carl Kals. Carl?
Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, or whatever is applicable to you. So, next slide, please. So, in this talk, I'm going to talk about 5 different points. First of all, focus, then predatory journals and also low-quality journals, metrics, access, and then a conclusion. So next slide. First of all, focus. Focus of the journal that you want to publish in can be very different. You have journals that focus more on, for example, neuroethics, clinical ethics, pediatric ethics, nursing ethics, and there's a whole series of journals out there. Obviously, you want to make sure that the journal that you publish in, that there is a correspondence on that level. There's also journals that publish more broadly in certain fields, for example, philosophy, law, social science, that may also be interested in your contribution. And then last, there's also geography. And that is where some people seem to get lost a little bit. And I personally would not stress that focus too strongly. I think nobody would question whether their piece is suitable for the New England Journal or not, whether it has something to do with New England. Most people don't even know what New England is. However, for other journals, sometimes this, for example, Asian Bioethics Review, often people think that what you write has to be very strictly, specifically for and about Asia. That, for example, only Asian authors can publish there. No, everything that is relevant to Asia will publish, and I think for many other journals that is quite similar. And also a little footnote. I have a training in geography. About like 2/3 of the population on Earth actually lives in Asia. It's actually incredibly broad. So geography, I wouldn't focus too strongly on that. Then why is it important? First of all, editors may be more interested and also may understand your paper better. And the other reason that is also very important is that, like, obviously you want your paper to be read, right? You want it to be cited, and readers of a journal that has a similar focus will obviously matter more to what you write. The link I've put there below, jane.biosemantics.org, that is a helpful one. You can put in like a couple of keywords, you can put your abstract in it, and it'll come up with a list of potential journals. I would not rely too strongly on that because they often miss out completely on really important journals, but the other way around, they actually sometimes come up with journals that you might not have thought of. So it can be a bit helpful in that sense. Next slide, please. Then predator journals or low quality journals. We've organized this webinar once before. So there is a little bit of difference in my presentation. First of all, what journals are predatory and what not, especially, it's sometimes difficult to distinguish. But although it's difficult to define, you have to be careful. Nobody reads them, and that's really important, obviously. What sounds too good to be true usually isn't. So no or low open access fees. If they announce that, beware, because later in the process, when it becomes difficult to withdraw your paper, then all of a sudden unannounced fees will come up that they use fancy different names for, but it still comes down to the same. So be careful with that. And then I think the most important part, and that's not just about predatory journals, but also low quality journals. Reputation. Theirs, because often these journals don't have a good reputation. So be careful for that, but also yours. Obviously, these publications, they're going to end up on your CV. When you're going to apply for promotion, or whether you're looking for a job elsewhere, or also, for example, when you are looking to collaborate with other people in the field, people will look at your CV. People will look at where you publish. It really matters. So I started out saying it's difficult to distinguish, it's difficult to define. Still, you can find help with databases. Are they indexed in these databases? And be careful, because some journals will say that they're indexed in all sorts of databases that you've never heard of. Look for the ones that you know, that you've heard of. So next slide, please. Metrics. That is related to these databases. Not all databases have metrics. A metric is different. The most important ones, I've put them here because you will also see journals claiming to have very good metrics in metrics you've never heard of. Again, beware of that. I would say the holy grail of metrics is probably the Web of Science one from Clarivate. That one is called the journal impact factor. And people often use impact factor to mean all sorts of metrics. But technically, it's only that one that's called an impact factor. Another one that is also interesting is the Scopus one, which is owned by Elsevier. But don't worry, Scopus also takes non-Elsevier owned journals in account. Their metric is SiteScore. That's an interesting one because maybe their criteria are not as strict, but that also has the positive side that more journals are taken up in that, also smaller journals maybe that are more interesting in the niche sort of field that you're publishing in. And an additional advantage of SiteScore, as we will later look into, is also that they have a dynamic sort of scoring. A third one that is interesting is Scimago. That's one that is that works with the same data as Scopus, but calculates it differently. I will explain that. Google Scholar. Google Scholar is not as reliable, takes a lot of data in and is not so selective, but their H5 index is still used widely. Plus, I'll go into more of the advantage of that one as well. And then PubMed Central does not have any metrics, but I still want to mention it because it's an important database. So next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So the first one, the JIF, the impact factor. That one I mentioned already, it's very selective, but the metrics themselves are behind a paywall. So you have to check with your university whether they are subscribed to Clarivate. If not, you can't actually double check the impact factor. And that's another disadvantage, of course. It's based on their own Web of Science database. The list that I put here on the left, that is based on 2022 data. So that was published in June 23. So when you usually look in June, because that's when all the metrics come out. But because it's selective, for example, I only found 25 bioethics journals in this one. So that's relatively limited. You'll see there's actually more and more interesting bioethics journals. So next slide, please. So that's where Scopus comes in with the SiteScore. So they're less selective, which of course pros and cons, but it's free access. It's not behind a paywall. But it's only a journal per journal. So, for example, to set up this list on the left-hand side, I had to double check journal per journal, which is quite tedious, and which also explains why I haven't updated this list. Interestingly, they have a SiteScore tracker, which means that every month, around the 5th of the month, they update the SiteScore, and then in June they basically take the SiteScore, I think from the 5th of June, they then establish that one as the one for the previous year. For example, now in June 25, they will publish the SiteScore of 2024. And so you see double the journals are there, and you see there's some really interesting journals in there. I've only put like the top 32, but there's actually more. So yeah, then next slide, please. Scimago, that's interesting. It's a collaboration of a number of universities in the south of Spain. They are similar in the sense that to Scopus, in the sense that they work with the same database. However, their formula is weighted. What does that mean? That means that in their formula, they take up the impact of the journal in which you are cited. So the result can sometimes be quite different from cite score. And so, but you see, because they use the same data, you see the same number of journals that pop up there. Next slide, please. Then the H5 index. That one is quite unsophisticated, quite unselective. They often they take multiple. If you have like a publication that like that they drag up from different sources, then it will take up differently. You may have noticed that in your Google Scholar profile. However, what is unique, I would say, about this one is that you don't have to check journal per journal. If you Google bioethics journals in Google Scholar, you'll get this list. So you get like the whole top 20 of bioethics journal in Google Scholar. However, only the top 20, not more than that. And also what's interesting is that because there's no humans involved, it's just all algorithms that calculate this. It means that it is continuously updated as well. Next slide, please. Access. For a lot of scholars, this is a bugbear. In the selection of the journal where you want to publish in, when you select a journal, make sure that you know upfront how much they charge for open access if you have the funding for it. If you don't have the funding for it, obviously that's not going to be a factor, but then also look at, because different journals are with different publishers and different publishers have sometimes read-only access. For example, Springer Nature has a read-only access, and basically you have to ask the author, although we as ABR, we publish it via social media usually, like a special link where you are able to read the full article for free, no paywall, and immediately, no embargo on it. The only thing is you can't print it, you can't download it. It's an online access only. Another one that is also quite classic is a lot of journals are on PubMed Central that publishes the complete article after 12 months. However, that is 12 months after an article is included in an issue, not 12 months after the journal came, the article came online. Then the next slide, please. And this is something that's really important when choosing a journal. I mean, Piali also mentioned it already. Read what other articles they publish. That will already give you a good feel of what they are interested in. And in certain cases, it may also divulge, like, for example, what they have not published on. And you might actually say, like, okay, I propose this or that topic. Maybe you're interested in that. That's really important. A second one, don't hesitate to contact the editor with an abstract and ask if that is something they are interested in. First of all, I put two words in italic because they're important. Abstract. Again, abstract is really important. Don't expect an editor to read your full article. That's not realistic. You can't expect that. And so your abstract has to be good, important. And ask whether they are interested in it. Do not ask whether they're going to publish it, because the review process, they can't guarantee that. So ask whether they're interested in. That is it for me. Thank you very much.
All right, right on time. Unfortunately, we do not have time for any clarificatory questions at this point, so we have to move on. Thank you, Carl. So after you have submitted your paper to your chosen journal, it is now up to the editorial team to review your work. To give us an idea on the editor's journey when receiving a submission as well as the feedback process in publishing, let me call once again Professor Graham Laurie. Graham?
Thank you very much, Leander. Can we go directly to the next slide, please? Yeah, so as Leander just pointed out, I'm going to focus on two related aspects of the production process. First is my journey as an editor, and to give you some insights and some do's and don'ts with respect to my perceptions of what's being submitted to the journal. And secondly, I'm going to focus on you and how you can better deal with feedback that you will receive as a result of a submission to a journal. Next slide, please. So, from the editor's journey, first impressions matter hugely. Just picking up on the point made by Carl there at the end of his presentation, I am very happy to receive abstracts from people or queries even just in an email saying, I'm thinking about writing on this topic, would you be interested? That saves you and me and any other editor an awful lot of time when it comes to filtering and me getting a sense of, is this something not only we're interested in, but do I think this is actually going to be really quite impactful for the journal? So the way in which you approach me, the way in which you write your abstract, all of that really matters. And certainly if you submit to a journal in Springer Nature, the family of Springer Nature, the system that we currently use to manage all of those documents is called Editorial Manager. And when you submit your work, somebody's asking me to increase my voice, sorry. When you submit your work, you are invited to put comments in that pro forma to the editor. So please, at that point, tell me why you think your work is relevant to our journal. Tell me why you think it's original. Tell me why, you're welcome. Tell me why you think it's significant. Yeah? So those first impressions are really crucial. The second point here, it really picks up on comments that have been made by Piali and Carl, but we can't stress them enough. Please read the journal's aims and objectives. Very often, we get in Asian bioethics, we get papers that are purely medical and have nothing to do with bioethics whatsoever, and it's a complete desk reject. It's a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time, because I might not have an immediate response to you, so you're wasting precious days or weeks when you haven't even checked out whether or not the journal is a fit for what you want to say. So all credible journals have aims and objectives. Please check them out. You'll see ours, if you look at the Asian Bioethics Review, there's an eternal question around what do we mean by Asian? Do you have to be based in Asia? Do you have to focus on something about Asia? We took a long time to describe our aims and objectives to be as inclusive as possible. It's great if you're focusing on Asia, but you don't absolutely have to. So look at the aims and objectives. Also, ensure that the type of research that you're publishing is one that is accepted by the journal. And what I mean by that in the field of bioethics is there's many different ways in which we can do bioethics research. It can be normative, it can be doctrinal, it can be empirical, it can be conceptual. As far as we're concerned, all of that is fine. That's not true of all journals. So make sure that the approach to the research that you take is one that is welcomed by the journal. And finally, take time to show why this journal, why this contribution that you're offering, and why now. If you can offer a sense of urgency as to why your research should be published, that really helps to make a strong first impression. Going back to the example of AI, of course there's been an explosion of papers around the topic of the ethics of AI. At the beginning of that process, editors would have said, wow, we need to get on top of that, we need to publish it. Now that initial wave has passed, now we're asking questions, okay, we don't just need a summary of what the potential ethical issues are, what's new, and why does it need to be published now? Because there's already so much been written on that topic, why now? If you can address that question, you will get a start in the peer review process. Next slide, please. To catch my attention, I'm just mention one more time the abstract. It's really important. I won't say any more. Hopefully the message is clear. But make my life easy. State clearly and early on in your paper what is the original contribution. Don't leave me hanging. You're not writing a novel. You know, I'm not waiting for the chapter 24 to have the big reveal of who the murderer is. That's not what you're doing. You are seeking to make an original and significant contribution to academia. Tell me what it is, and tell me soon. Yeah? And similarly, it's the third point, don't make me work too hard to find out that idea. If you're trawling through lots of literature and then your idea is buried down in page 12, it's going to get lost. So make sure that your idea is driving your analysis and not the other way around. This point is really important, particularly the next point, pedestrian contributions. It's particularly relevant in the Asian Bioethics Review. Quite often what happens when an author is looking at a topic, they will take something like Beecham and Childress' 4 principles and they will apply it to a new topic. Okay, but there's many reasons to be critically reflective on that as an approach. First of all, why are you applying a school of thought that was developed 50 years ago by white American men to a context that they probably didn't imagine? Why is that relevant? I'm not saying it's not relevant, but you have to demonstrate that it is. But it can be very pedestrian to receive a paper when people have just taken a school of thought and tried to apply it and then mix it into the topic. That's not robust work. If you want to apply something at Beecham and Childress, maybe it's defensible, but you have to defend it. Think about why you're applying a particular bioethical framing, and I mentioned framing earlier on. What I want to talk about next is the difference between a desk reject, the transfer desk, and seeking peer review. So a desk reject is when an editor will simply say no when they read the abstract or when the paper comes in, probably because it's not a good fit for the journal, or the abstract is not clear enough, or if you look more deeply into the article, there are some of the common mistakes or flaws that I mentioned in the earlier presentation. So what you want to do is to avoid at all costs a desk reject, yeah? Because it means that you've wasted your time, there's no prospect of feedback. Our practice within ABR is we will always give you the reasons for a desk reject, but ideally what you want to do is to move to the next stage. With Springer Nature, there's 2 possible next stages. One is seeking peer review, and that's obvious. I'll say more about that in a second. But the other service that Springer Nature offers is something called the transfer desk. This is an internal team within Springer Nature where an editor can send a paper that they don't want to the transfer desk, and the transfer desk will see if that paper can actually find a home in another journal within the Springer Nature family. It's a very, very good service, and it's done anonymously. So, for example, we quite often will receive a paper from the transfer desk, but we don't know that it's coming from the transfer desk. So you're not prejudiced by the service. If anything, you're benefited by the service, but it's at the discretion of the editor. If I think a paper is really poor in its quality and it's not salvageable, I'll just reject it. If I think there's something here, but it's not really good for our journal, I'll send it to the transfer desk. But if you go past those elements and we go to the peer review, now let's move on to the next part of the paper. Next slide, please. The feedback process. Just to explain the context of our process in ABR, just to give you some context, and we use a process of double-blind review on all original articles. That means that we will seek a minimum of 2 peer reviewers who don't know each other, who don't know you. And we then gather that feedback, and we will send it to you, sometimes edited down, if the messages are being repeated, etc. But we try to present it to you in as positive a way as possible, and I'll say more about that in a second. My second point here, peer review, a special plea. The biggest challenge these days with journals is securing good peer review. People are incredibly busy. Many times they will just say no. And it does an injustice to authors, but it's understandable that people are busy and occupied with other things. So my special plea to you is this: if somebody, an editor, approaches you and asks you to do peer review, even if you feel it's above your pay grade or your skill set, please say yes. You'll learn a lot from the process. You will help the journal incredibly. Even if you can only say a few things about the paper, it still helps us to take a decision. So please participate actively in the peer review process, because it helps all of us as a scholarly community in the long run. Everything I've said up until now in this presentation and in the previous one, these are all tips to enhance your chances of a positive review from a journal. If you follow our advice, there's a very, very good chance you can get to the peer review stage. But just as a reminder, here are some fatal mistakes that will not get you to that peer review stage. The first one is either a poorly developed argument that's unsalvageable, or the paper is overly descriptive and doesn't really say anything new. Point, there's insufficient originality. You're not communicating to the editor that you're actually saying anything new. Think about a topic like euthanasia. So much has been written on euthanasia. How do you find a novel angle on euthanasia? What is it? It won't be about revisiting the fundamental arguments unless you are challenging those fundamentally and saying people have got it wrong. But otherwise, to write on euthanasia, it's very challenging to get an angle, as opposed to some new technology when there's not anything written or not much written, and then you've got the prospect of originality, but just be careful that you don't fall into the trap that I mentioned before of taking a school of thought from ethics and just applying it to that technology. That's pedestrian and not very original. Another fatal mistake is a failure to show good knowledge in the field, i.e. you're not familiar with the literature that you're seeking to contribute to. And the final point is the one about structure. Structure is crucial. If your paper is messy and the ideas are not clear and the way through the paper is not clear, it can result in a reject. Next slide, please. So, to continue with our particular policy in ABR, if you get a desk reject, you will still get full and supportive feedback on the reasons. We'll tell you why, and if it's possible, we'll give you pointers as to how you can improve your research somewhere else to submit your paper to another journal. Our philosophy is that peer review must be supportive, respectful, and productive. We will edit feedback from peer reviewers if we think it's not respectful, while still maintaining the core message that's trying to be communicated to authors. And my third point here is about your response to peer review. There's some myths around this, I think, that we need to bust. The first point is you do not have to do everything the reviewer suggests. And in fact, if you've got two reviewers, frustratingly, you'll find sometimes they contradict each other. So you need to find a way through that. And the way to do that is my point B here, to respond reasonably and fully and well to the suggestions. If you disagree with a reviewer, tell me why. That's fine, as long as you justify it well. And if you see the inconsistency between the feedback that you're getting, then explain that and explain how you think you can possibly navigate it. So it's about point C here, explaining what you've done and why. And another piece of advice I would give is try not to take peer review personally. These reviewers don't know you, they're not interested in you, they're interested in the quality of the work. So take the feedback constructively, take it as comments on the quality of the work. If it's accurate, then the work can be better. If it's not accurate, then you can justify rejecting it, yes? But just remember that all of our work is always better because of peer review. Piali's made a call for you to be your first peer reviewer to reflect critically on your own work. That's absolutely right and excellent. But also ask your friends and your colleagues to look at your work before you submit it. And take that feedback in the spirit in which it's intended. Next slide, please. So take-home messages. Help the editor to help you by following these tips, please. Avoid a desk reject by sending your work to the right journal and demonstrating clearly why this journal ought to publish your work. If you get the abstract right, the rest will follow. I would strongly encourage you to treat peer review as a supportive exercise, respond thoughtfully and don't take it personally. And remember that all of this is about you honing your research value, becoming a better academic through these processes, and they're designed to help you do that. Next slide, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Graham. Now, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat and we will address them shortly. But before we proceed to the Q&A, to introduce the Southeast Asia Bioethics Network Mentoring Program, let us all welcome Dr. Tai Peksan. Peksan?
Yeah, thank you, Leander. Hi, everyone. I would like to share with you what the Southeast Asia Bioethics Network has planned to help the Southeast Asia bioethics scholars in the area of research and publishing. Next slide, please.
May mga hindi pa ako nakuha certificate.
One of the aims of the
Sasing na
network,
namin sa Manila. Sira
one of the aims of the network is to develop a vibrant bioethics community in Southeast Asia. We see research and publishing as an important area and an area with potential to be developed. And so for this, we want to invest some of our resources to help build research and publishing in Southeast Asia. And we collaborate with ABR in this area. And as you know, ABR is one of the world's leading journals in bioethics. So what we plan with regard to the mentoring program are three different things. The first is publishing webinars, such as what we are currently doing now. This is the second webinar on publishing that we have organized. The first was in January, also together with the editorial team of ABR. And this second webinar is an evolution of the first webinar where we took into account the feedback from participants, and then it included more content to respond to the feedback that we have. So, for example, we included elements of AI, the ethics of AI in research and publishing. We also included research integrity, as you had heard from Graham and his team earlier. The second initiative that we want to undertake to build up the capacity of research and publishing in Southeast Asia is mentoring program, which I will be talking about a little bit more in a little while. And the third initiative is we plan to conduct webinars in the future on specific topics in research and publishing. As I have said, we had 2 publishing webinars. And for our future webinars, we would like to concentrate on specific topics in research and publishing. I will be speaking more about it in a little while as well. And all in all, what we planned to do really is we want to support Southeast Asia scholars in their academic development and to foster innovative research in bioethics. Next slide, please. So with regard to our mentoring program, we would like to provide researchers in Southeast Asia with the opportunity to be mentored in research and publishing. How we do this is a two-step process. Next slide, please. So in the first step, we will invite Southeast Asia bioethics researchers to submit abstracts of their research to us. And then the network will hold a webinar to provide constructive feedback of the abstracts. And in the second step, from the submitted abstracts, 6 will be selected where the researchers will then be offered mentoring opportunity. Next slide, please. So with regard to the invitation to submit abstracts, the network will make a call in early 2025 to invite Southeast Asia researchers to submit abstracts of their proposed research. We will do this through emails to you. For those who are in our contact list, we will also post it in our social media website. Now, the details of the submission will be stated more clearly in our call, and we will also notify you who you can contact if you have further questions with regard to this submission of abstracts. So once we receive the submitted abstracts, we will send the abstracts to the ABR team, and the editors will look at them and they will provide feedback on the abstracts. And after that, the network will organize a webinar for the researchers where the ABR editorial team will provide constructive feedback on the abstracts. So that is the first step that will take place with regard to the mentoring program. Next slide, please. And with regard to to the second step, which is a one-on-one mentoring, and that is a narrower mentoring process. The ABR editorial team will select 6 of the submitted abstracts, and they will offer the researchers the opportunity to be paired with experienced bioethics researchers so as to receive a one-on-one mentoring in the research and writing journey. So in other words, at every milestone, that particular researcher will receive constructive feedback on his research and writing. The selection of the 6 submitted abstracts will be based on defined criteria, which we will state in our call as well. And it will include equality, it will include diversity and inclusivity as well. And the details will be notified in the call. Next slide, please. So that is with regard to the mentoring program, and with regard to the third initiative that we are doing, which is webinars on specific topics in research and publishing. The network would like, and in fact needs to understand more deeply what the publishing and research needs are of Southeast Asia researchers. So we want to seek your views, and in so doing, we will be sending out a survey to seek your views on the challenges of researching, writing, and getting published in bioethics network, in bioethics journals. Again, this survey will be sent to you for those in our contact list, and it will also be posted in our social media by early May 2025. So what we really hope is that you would participate in this research so that our findings will enable us, together with the ABR team, to provide better support for you as Southeast Asian researchers when you do your research and publishing. So the future webinars will be based on your feedback, and they will address specific topics that you have pointed out in the survey. And so I would really encourage you and urge you to take some time to complete this survey so that you could let us know how we can assist you in your journey for as you undertake your research and publishing. Right, next slide, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peksan. So I hope that everyone here today will grab this amazing opportunity to participate in this one-of-a-kind mentoring program, and of course, in the other activities of our network.